I think we're ready for our next presentation. So hi and welcome everybody to this Mathcad presentation held by Andrew from PTC. My name is Finn Sugden and I'll be your host.
So hi everybody, thank you for joining this demo session at Alfasoft today, and thank you for listening into this one about Mathcad. My name is Andrew McGough, and I've been with the Mathcad product team since Mathcad Prime was first released back in 2010 or 2009. And I was first in the product definition team and then in product management. And before I came to PTC, I worked in the US aviation industry. And then before I came to the US, I worked in the UK defense industry for one of the Marconi companies. So I came from industry and used Mathcad in industry and then ended up at PTC where I got to play with Mathcad itself. So I've seen the product mature over the last few years. The recently released Mathcad Prime 8 continues to be driven by customer requests for functionality, and I'll touch on those a little bit later in this deck. But firstly, for those new to Mathcad or those who haven't looked at Mathcad Prime for a few years, I'd like to detail what's in Mathcad that makes it such a valuable tool in your product design process. And I also want to touch a little on what's next for Mathcad. So Mathcad Prime is a strategically important part of PTC's product portfolio, and the ability to document and calculate live engineering math is as important today for both us and our customers as it was when the first release of Mathcad came out. So before we look at what Mathcad is, I'd like to look at the challenges it was designed to overcome. So the engineering calculations that form the basis for product design and are used at every stage in development have in the past often been excluded from the same formality of management as other product design information. And in some ways, the product data that ultimately defines the design is the most important to document as the source of truth. There is often still a lack of standardized processes and tools for documenting engineering knowledge. A company may use several tools spread across several departments and affiliated companies, and many of those tools may not be specifically designed to manage the different components of engineering knowledge. A lot of use of tools not designed for that purpose happens. And because of this, management of information becomes complex. Information will need to be manually consolidated to create deliverables, and that makes traceability difficult. And it becomes difficult to find and reuse data, and there is significant time to bring new resources up to speed. Excuse me. And the impact of these challenges can be difficult to fix without significant work, right? Engineering calculations created using disparate systems can result in poor communication and a loss of knowledge. When design intent is stored in multiple locations, process inefficiencies can occur. Without early design validation, your design may not be optimized, and so trade-off analysis could be skewed. And bad traceability between requirements and design will result in your final product not necessarily doing what the market needs. And math errors caught late or worse, missed entirely, could dramatically impact the success of your product. This is the the drive to be able to identify issues early where they're cheaper to fix, time-wise and cost-wise, rather than later where they're more expensive to fix. So what both engineers and the enterprise need is a solution for managing engineering knowledge that allows engineers to record and communicate design intent quickly and easily. So what would that deliver? So when people use the right software for the right purpose, they become more productive. Communicating results is as important as calculating them. And engineering activities don't happen in isolation, but part of processes that support business initiatives. User experience, documentation functionality, and an extensive and robust calculation engine are paramount for users to successfully record the live engineering calculations. And we go back to the need to show your work, right? This goes back to that second point. Communicating results is as important as calculating them. You need to be able to indicate why you've come to the conclusion you have. So PTC Mathcad is a digital engineering notebook used to perform your calculations and manage your engineering intent. And we can break down how we do that in the product at the very top level into two areas of focus: how we document it and how we calculate it. We need to strike a balance between those release to release to make sure that the level of functionality on one adequately complements the other. The value of incredible math engine enhancements is lessened if we have bad UI to get to it. And conversely, the nicest, prettiest front end won't hide deficiencies in the calculation engine. So we carefully plan releases to make sure we can offer enhancements across the goals of the product. So there are several ways that Mathcad enables users to manage live calculations. Its document-oriented approach allows rich presentation features to be combined with the powerful math engine-driven calculations. Advanced engineering math tools are provided to manipulate calculations, and integrations to third parties and process enhancements help you fit Mathcad into your existing design process. One overriding requirement we have, no matter how much functionality we try to incorporate in the product, is that users should feel comfortable and productive within 15 minutes of using the product, right? The complexity of your work in Mathcad is ultimately driven by you and what you need to do with it, but picking the application up and starting to use it shouldn't be difficult, for both authors of worksheets or consumers of them. So Mathcad utilizes a ribbon user interface so you can quickly access the functions you need. And if you don't like to take your hands off the keyboard, there are also extensive keyboard shortcuts for all the major commands and insert functions. So when you type your math, there's really no need to take your hands away from the keys. And that includes text as well. If you want to insert math and text and whatever you want to put in the worksheet, there are keyboard shortcuts to enable you to put that in without having to go to the UI. The environment is multi-tabbed, so that allows several worksheets to be viewed and used at once. And Mathcad provides many document formatting and control features you'd expect from the use of everyday word processing software. But when math becomes complex, it can be difficult to follow. So a range of visual presentation features are also included in Mathcad to help color that information. And that's why you can use text to add clarity to the math along with images. Text and math can be formatted in the way a user wants. You can add plots to visualize your data, and collapsible lockable areas can be used to contain information that doesn't necessarily need to be read or that you want to protect from modification. The comprehensive math engine in Mathcad provides the ability for both numeric and symbolic math to be calculated, and you can write and calculate math that uses both in your worksheets. There's a pretty rich function library included with the ability to add your own custom functions, which together provide algorithms for a large variety of engineering situations. Excuse me. The built-in unit support allows disparate unit systems to be used with no risk of unit compatibility issues. Units are combined and results provided in the unit of your choice. And unit compatibility issues are flagged, which is a great unit checking mechanism. Mathcad includes an easy-to-use math programming language, let's call it, for algorithm development and other calculations that require a programmatic approach. So a programming language you can use to structure your math. Solve blocks can be used to optimize a set of design parameters, and those parameters can be adjusted to quickly explore design changes. And Mathcad also includes comprehensive support for matrices, so you can calculate and document matrix math pretty easily. And as we said before, you need to be able to integrate Mathcad with the other tools you use. And it can be integrated with PLM tools. You can manage it in your content control system. And it has a powerful integration with Creo, which is called the Engineering Notebook. There's many ways in which external data can be brought in, represented and used in Mathcad worksheets. There are multiple file access functions allowing you to read in or write to files of data of different formats. You can embed an Excel spreadsheet in Mathcad and use it as a calculation component in your worksheet, or simply embed applications in the form of objects, allowing you to link dynamically to existing files. And Mathcad Prime includes an API, and I've probably done a particularly bad job of advertising this to you, as it was included in Prime 3.1. And the API is simple, but contains a number of powerful commands. So you can really build applications that open, change values, calculate, and get values from the Mathcad worksheets. Something that I'm hoping that we can include in webinars later this year. And to make integration to your processes easier, default templates and the ability to create, use, and distribute custom templates is included, which allows you to standardize on the look and feel and even content of your company worksheets. You can include separate Mathcad worksheets into your worksheet and cache them there, so you can reuse existing content. You can include existing Mathcad worksheets in your current Mathcad worksheet. And we provide a legacy worksheet converter to allow users of older versions of the software to convert their content to the newer version. So before I get to Primate, let's take a quick look at the product itself, because I don't know how many people are listening in have used Mathcad Prime. This is the application. It consists of a page area for the worksheets themselves. Here's a number of worksheets I've already opened here, and the ribbon UI. So multiple worksheets can be opened at the same time and used at the same time. You can calculate all of these. And all of the content in here is driven by the keyboard shortcuts or driven by the UI. This right now is a document that's set up as, I think it's a letter format document. So when you print this, it's going to look like a typical US formatted document, but you know, there are European page sizes as well. And here we have text where we introduce the issue we have, the problem. This is an area which we can collapse and expand to show users some math that isn't necessarily needed to be seen at the top level, but it needs to be included in the worksheet. Here's an image. Here's some math. We're making some definitions here. We're doing some calculations here. Here's a plot in this particular worksheet. This is an Excel spreadsheet, and all of these Excel component, sorry, and all of these constructs can be put into the worksheet in any way you want to create a document of the engineering problem that you're trying to record. You know, the worksheets I have here go from simple. This is a 2-page worksheet. In fact, this is a 1-page worksheet detailing the actual force on a caliber bolt at a given torque, to slightly more complex ones, modeling the ocean. But all of them have a live math engine. So all of them mean that if you change a value, the worksheet will recalculate and give you the answers depending on that new value. And as I said, all of these values can be added either through keyboard shortcuts or through the UI. And this is the ribbon UI, a very simple ribbon UI. There are 9 tabs. The first one allows you to insert most of the more widely used math operators or math constructs, including some of the regions. This is a math region, this is an image region, this is a text region. So you can insert those regions here. This allows you to insert all of the common math operators. This symbols that you want to use for variables or identifiers. The programming keywords, math constants, and symbolic keywords and operators if you're using symbolic math. And on this tab, you can also understand label styles, which are styles of identifiers that differentiate between variables and constants and units. Change the unit system, add an equation break, add a subscript. There's a bunch of the most widely used on this first tab. The input-output tab allows you to interface with other data. So this includes the ability to insert an include worksheet. You know, you can pick a worksheet from your browser, and then that worksheet gets calculated at that point in the worksheet. The legacy worksheet converter, commands to get data into Mathcad, either via a graphical user interface or via embedding Excel into your worksheet itself. The ability to insert objects, COM objects. The combo box input control, which allows you to define a number of different variables that allow you to set up ways of using a drop-down menu to configure the rest of your worksheet. And Inputs and outputs here are how we interact with API applications. You can insert an input like this. This is the definition. You can define as an input. This is an evaluation. You can define as an output. And then when you do that, you'll be able to show inputs and outputs in the worksheet, and they're the things that will be communicated externally via the API. And this is how we use the engineering notebook integration with Creo. And that you can push values to Creo and derive geometry from Mathcad, or get values from Creo and analyze geometrical values in Mathcad. But it's also how you would write your own API applications. Functions is the function tab is the list of all of the inbuilt predefined functions, and there are hundreds of these, all in their different categories. We show you what arguments you need. You can go to help and understand how each of those are used. The matrix tables tab allows you to manipulate matrices and tables in your worksheet. Plots allows you to insert a plot, a number of different types of plots, and then format those plots, adding symbols, line styles, different color scheme, logarithmic scaling, and format the plot values. Math formatting does what it says. You can format math regions, change the font, the style, the color, the highlight, but also change results formatting for some general results format like display precision or trailing zeros. And again, some label style control where you yourself can change the style of labels for variables, constants, units, etc. Text formatting allows you to format text and also insert hyperlinks and perform spell check on your text. The calculation tab allows you to turn on or off auto calculations, step through the error tracing in programs, and step through the error tracing, turn redefinition warnings on or off. That's something we added in 8, and I'll talk about later, and has a bunch of other calculation options that are relevant to some of the advanced calculation options in Mathcad. Document allows you to set up the product in the way, set up the document in the way you want. Again, orientation, margins, the page size, turn the grid on or off, add information to the header or footer. And resources is really a tab that, again, I think I need to do a better job of advertising. When you pick Mathcad up and use it for the first time, this is the tab you want to go to. It includes references for reference documents. Read this first, installation guide. The migration guide is useful. Tutorials, the help, keyboard shortcut document, a link to the PTC Mathcad community, which is a really, really active and useful community for us. We get a lot of criticisms, we get a lot of feedback, we get a lot of suggestions, and we interact with the community as much as we can, and we take feedback from the community as much as we can. Engineering resources provide links to worksheets that you can use to start up in the industry that you're in, and a link to the Learning Connector. New users goes to some of the Learning Connector playlists, and that really provides you with videos of how to get up and running in certain areas of Mathcad. So getting back to the presentation, Mathcad Prime 8 is our latest version of the application, and it was released last month. So over the past few years, we've continued a yearly release frequency in line with other PTC products. Prime 8 was released in early March. Prime 9 will be released in March 2023, Prime 10 in March 2024. And focus for each release always starts with gap fill enhancements. So these so-called gap fill enhancements are functionality we add to Prime that legacy Mathcad users have come to rely on. And this continues to be the focus moving forward through Prime 9 and onwards. So when functionality is added to Prime, we always prioritize based on user input at the time. So there is infrastructure work we need to do for each release to make sure we stay current with things like new versions of OS, Microsoft.NET, because Mathcad is a .NET application, and third-party components used in the product. But the main goal is to provide the functionality Mathcad users need to calculate and document their engineering. And we listen to customer feedback, and our job is to prioritize and implement that functionality in each release, depending on that feedback. So built on the new equation control interface that makes entering math content incredibly easy in Mathcad Prime, the early versions of Prime included the most widely requested items, such as unit support, a comprehensive function library, symbolics, Excel component, and math formatting. And I want to point out again the equation control. It's not something that we really talk about that much in Mathcad Prime, but the equation control, which is the engine that allows you to write math in natural math notation, is incredibly intuitive. There were thousands of hours of usability tests that went into designing it. So actually writing math in your worksheet couldn't be easier. More recent versions of Prime have continued that trend with functionality like area protection, equation wrapping, 2D plot enhancements, spell check, and the combo box input control. And there may be functionality on this list that isn't used by some customers, and there may be functionality not in here that customers would like to see. We try to take the customer base as a whole into account when prioritizing content. If what users need to see in the product isn't in it yet, it's not because we don't know about it or don't care to put it in. We document all customer feedback and always use it as the basis for new release prioritization efforts. And that doesn't mean we don't want to continue to hear from users. On the contrary, it's feedback from users that informs our release content decision process every release. So Mathcad Prime 8 contains updates in several areas of functionality. Application updates, symbolic and numeric engine updates, usability enhancements, and miscellaneous functionality we need to add. So application updates are generally focused on the UI and productivity. And this is the area of updates which include those gap fill functionality items for users of legacy Mathcad versions, but not just those, right? These are areas of functionality that were in Mathcad because they're areas of functionality that users want to see. We continue to expand and advance the Symbolic Engine in Mathcad Prime with updates and enhancements not seen in previous versions of the product. And I'll talk a little bit about the Symbolic Engine later, but the one we have was introduced in Prime 6 and Prime 7, and it gives us a much better ability to add to it than we had before. The numeric engine is core to what Mathcad does, and we keep it current with each release. And usability enhancements are updates that make using Mathcad on a day-to-day basis much easier. I think usability enhancements are those things that help keep a product live, right? I mean, we have users that use the product day in, day out and find small tweaks or issues they have with it. And we want to make sure we can accommodate those users and make the interface better each release. Miscellaneous updates can be any number of items that don't easily fall into those other categories. So application updates in Prime 8 include the ability for the application to warn users when identifiers are redefined in the worksheet. So this is functionality very familiar to legacy Mathcad users. They've been asking for this for a while. Identifiers can be any item in the worksheet, user or system defined, that are defined as a specific value. And these include variables, constants, functions, units. And when writing a worksheet, if you reuse an identifier and redefine it to a different value, that identifier will have a green warning frame, and the math region it's in will have a warning annotation indicating the type of redefinition that's occurred. And these warnings can be turned off in general or by identify category. A small item, but in Prime 8, you can also now turn on black frames around the header, footer, and page area of the portions of the worksheet, which helps the worksheet content to stand out. And it is a very simple but much requested piece of legacy version functionality. Right? It may be that we look at more complicated things to add into the product, but again, sometimes what customers are asking for isn't that complicated and does actually mean does actually make how they use the product much easier. We've added a partial derivative operator to the operators menu. The partial derivative can be used in a new math region or to directly replace a derivative operator. And this is in situations where the calculation requires partial derivative syntax. And in Prime 7, the previous release, we added the combo box input control. And this allows you to control worksheet calculations with an easy to create and use drop-down menus of variable definitions. So multiple variable values can be defined for multiple variables. And in Prime 8, we've added the ability to paste multiple variable values directly into the combo box edit mode and have the combo box edit mode accommodate that in a number of different ways. So you can copy a selection of values from a matrix, select that same size of data and paste. You can paste into a single value box. And if you paste into a single value box that's near the bottom of the edit mode, we will resize the combo box. And this really makes editing and creating more complex combo box input controls easier. Something that we really wanted to work on, as the combo box that we added in Prime does allow multiple variables, which we have not had before in Mathcad, and that opens the door for much more complicated constructs. So I have a short video here just to take a quick look at these updates in the product. So the redefinition warnings, here is a V and power. V and power have been defined as variables, and here they've been redefined, one as a variable, one as a function. So we have green notifications on them, which you can turn off in general, or you can turn off specifically by looking at the user-defined scalar variables and turning those off. But we leave them on because they're not an error, and it informs the user you've redefined this identifier in the worksheet. Likely it is you did it on purpose. The borders are on the header and page area and footer, very simple. You go to the document tab and you can show frame on the header, you can show frame on the page area, you can show frame on the footer. And in the past, users have used this to effectively complete or baseline a set of calculations in a worksheet. Right, this is a step they take to indicate that this worksheet has been reviewed. Here we have a derivative operator that we can replace with a partial derivative operator in the math menu. And again, that's where in context, the partial derivative operator is necessary for that specific math calculation. And this is the edit mode of the combo box. And here you see multiple variables and multiple values. So now you can take, here's just an example of data, a bunch of data, and now you can paste that where you want to paste that in and replace everything at the same time. And this just makes it much easier to create bigger, grander, more complicated combo boxes, which really allows you to turn your worksheets into configurators, right? You can have lots of different variables and lots of different values and see lots of different outcomes for specific items. So this is the third release of Mathcad since we included the new Symbolic Engine. And for those of you that haven't used Mathcad before, there's a numeric engine and a symbolic engine, and we replaced the symbolic engine with a new one to us back in Prime 6 and Prime 7 by default. And we did that because one of the biggest reasons is we wanted more control over it. We didn't really have that much control over what we could do with the legacy Symbolic Engine, and we'd been amassing customer feedback on, wouldn't it be good if you could do this in Symbolics, or could you fix that in Symbolics? And a lot of that wasn't easy to do with what we had. It's a great engine what we had. It's just we didn't have the ability really to modify it or enhance it the way we wanted to. And I think it's easy demonstrable how much of a benefit the new Symbolic Engine has been to have the level of control we now have over symbolic calculations. And once again, this release brings several enhancements, some of which were driven from customer feedback over the years, and some of which are new and were just made possible with our ability to use and modify the engine we now have. So I won't dig into these too deeply. Symbolics is an area that those people that use it heavily, but not everybody uses it. But it does include significant improvement and expansion in use and performance of symbolic integral transforms, Fourier, Laplace, and Z-trans, and their inverse functions. We've got 2 new Fourier keywords to allow you to choose normalization and oscillatory factors relevant for your Fourier calculation. There's been general improvement for symbolic calculation for calculus operators, such as limits, derivatives, and integrals, and of different keywords such as solve, rewrite, and simplify. And we've made some improvements in symbolic results when using undefined variables. And this is a trend that is going to continue, right? Each release now, we're taking customer feedback on what they want to see with symbolic math, and we're going to put enhancements and updates in each release in Symbolics. And we have a very passionate engine team that are very experienced with math, both numeric and symbolic. And talking about numeric, we do have a numeric engine in Mathcad Prime. It is a very comprehensive engine. It's very mature, but each release we still make updates to it to ensure we stay up to date with suggestions from customers and our own internal development team. So in Primate, we've updated the definitions of physical constants in accordance with the regulatory bodies that govern those, NIST and CODATA, and have made updates to some functions, specifically ODE, solve, and state space numeric functions to improve reporting for invalid input conditions. So again, each release we look at, application, symbolic engine, numeric engine, and we also look at usability enhancements. So customers can sometimes spend up to hours at a time, right, in Mathcad. Making day-to-day use of the product an annoyance-free experience is an important goal, and one we continue to work on. So we get feedback from customers, as well as internal feedback here at PTC from developers who use the product all the time while they're developing it, and subject matter experts who use the product all the time, not just when they're talking to customers about the product, but also in their own work. So each release, we try to add some of the suggested usability updates. So in Primate, there is now a context menu on each worksheet tab for each worksheet that contains the most frequently used worksheet-related commands. And that includes existing commands like calculate, close, print. And we've added some new commands like move tab, copy full file path, open containing folder. And move tab is actually something you can now do from the context menu or also by drag and drop of the worksheet tab itself. And I can show you a video that demonstrates that in a little bit. Each worksheet tab now also has its own close button and an unsaved indicator, so you can tell at a glance which worksheets have been modified but not yet saved. You can zoom in and out of the worksheet using control of the mouse wheel. That's something that was actually requested on our PTC Mathcad customer community. And it was a good idea, something I know that we've missed for a while, so we put that in. And the zoom slider has been modified to make it much easier to select specific zoom levels. And although this isn't, this gets into usability, but it's also to a certain extent an application update, there's a remove text format button on the text formatting tab. And that's useful when if you're creating a Mathcad worksheet based on text from many different sources, URLs, internet pages, Word, other, PowerPoint, you can now select those and remove all of the text formatting and go to the default text formatting for Mathcad. So again, this is a very quick video highlighting some of those updates. So this is the context menu on each tab. You can calculate, close a number of different ways, move the tab, copy the full file path, open the containing folder, print and save as. And open containing folder and copy full file path I find very useful because sometimes I have a lot of worksheets open and I'd like to know where I've opened them from. And so now, you can paste, this is the worksheet file path itself. You can drag and drop and rearrange worksheets in your view. You can close worksheets. If you notice, we got a warning there because that worksheet had an asterisk on to indicate that it's been edited but unsaved. So you need to save it to remove that asterisk. And we have the text formatting removal. So if you want to just remove text formatting and go back to the default text formatting for that worksheet, you can do that there. So again, these usability enhancements, we want to make using the product on a day-to-day basis just a little bit easier for customers and users. So there are a couple of important updates in Primate that I've grouped under the miscellaneous tag. And firstly, Primate has been certified to run on the current released version of Windows 11. And OS updates are never a simple exercise because it's not just Windows OS that we have to consider, it's also the version of .NET we have to consider because we use .NET in the product. So even small differences in how the product runs on the platform need to be addressed. And secondly, and this is more for existing Mathcad legacy users, Primate also includes a Save As HTML option in the legacy worksheet converter. So since we added this so-called standalone converter in Prime 7, unlike earlier versions of Mathcad Prime, you no longer need the legacy version of the application installed on your system for the legacy worksheet conversion to Prime format process to work. Right, so it used to be that you had to install the legacy version, you ran the worksheet converter in Mathcad Prime, and it actually used the legacy version install as a conversion engine. Right, in Mathcad Prime 7, we've taken away that dependency. And so now you don't have to install any legacy version. However, if you don't have the legacy application installed, you can't see any legacy worksheets. So to cover the use case where customers may find legacy worksheets in the future after they no longer have access to a legacy application, Save as HTML option in Prime 8 Converter allows you to create a view of the legacy worksheet you can then compare the Prime 8 converted worksheet to. So what do I mean by that? So here's a quick video on that. So here we go to the input output tab and we open the worksheet converter. And typically what you do is you add a legacy Mathcad worksheet to convert. But now we also have a Save as HTML option here. So when you run that, we create an HTML version of that worksheet. So that when you convert it, we have two files that have been created, the MCDX from the XMCD and an HTML file. So now we can find those in the file system and open both of them, the MCDX in Prime and the HTML in whatever system internet browser you use, and you can compare them. So the Save as HTML view will look exactly like how your legacy Mathcad worksheet looked. So then you can compare just to make sure the conversion worked the way you want it to. And there are some issues with conversion, partly because Mathcad constructs are slightly bigger, slightly different size. So sometimes you may see text gets pushed to a different page. And as we work on adding legacy Mathcad functionality back into the product, we get more and more functionality into the product that will allow more and more legacy worksheets to be converted and used immediately in Mathcad Prime. So this is a great tool for those users that find legacy worksheets moving forward and they don't have access to the legacy version. So as I noted before, everything we put in the product is guided by customer feedback. And through sales, our subject matter experts, resellers, the PTC Mathcad community idea site, direct to me, we do listen, we take the requests, and they're used to inform us on what we need to prioritize for the next and upcoming releases. The items we've added in each release were added when they were, because at the time, those were the most requested areas of functionality. And that's how we need to continue to move forward when structuring the content for each new release. So I do hear feedback sometimes along the lines of, why haven't you decided to put this in yet? Do you not feel it's important functionality? And in almost all the cases, it is important, not just to us or customers, but to me as somebody who uses the product. And it's not in the product yet because we don't feel it's necessary. It's not in the product yet because we had more important things that customers indicated needed to go in first. And we track all this. We have all of this data, and that's what we're trying to follow when we prioritize content for each release. So the next few releases will continue to focus on these gap fill customer requests. I'm in the process of planning the next 4 releases, and I'm focusing on the next 2. And these are some of the areas of functionality we're considering. And if what customers want isn't here, it's not because we're not going to implement it at some point. And it's not even that it won't be in one of the next few releases. Our prioritization is a living process that's informed by customers weekly and changes depending on that feedback. So textiles is currently at the top of our list of requested items. And we've already started work on that. It's something that I'm planning for Prime 9, and I've already seen some proof of concept for that. Again, the same with the gradient operator. It's the last legacy operator we need to add to Prime. And again, it's something we've started work on for Prime 9. And the same with PDE solve in solve blocks, one of the last remaining math updates that impacts the ability to get the result you need. And we've started work on that in Prime 9. And I've listed scripting separately here on this list, as it's probably the thing we hear most from customers. It's a complicated area of functionality. It's very large, and we've started to discuss with subject matter experts and customers just how we provide that worksheet functionality that scripting provides in legacy Mathcad. Scripting is a very wide-ranging area of functionality, and we're trying to determine the scope of it so we can better design it for a future release of Mathcad. So as I said, development has already started on Prime 9 with some work already investigated for Prime 10. Some of the stuff that we've started on 9, I mentioned before, we've already started some usability items on Prime 9, things like updating all of our color pickers with a custom color picker option. So you can choose a custom color. And I hope we can provide more information on upcoming functionality Mathcad webinars we'll have later this year. And that's it. So many thanks for letting me talk to you today about Mathcad. For those of you that are familiar with Mathcad, I hope the first part where I talked about what Mathcad is wasn't too onerous. I just want to make sure that if we have people here that haven't used Mathcad before, they can see the product and understand what it's there for. I am always happy to talk about the product, so I do really appreciate this opportunity. And if you haven't done so already, I hope you can try the product out soon. Many thanks, and very happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Great presentation. So we do actually have some questions here that you might be able to help us answering. The first one is, are you planning to update the date formats to the ISO standard or the date format that we use in the Nordic countries?
So yes, so right now in the header and footer in Mathcad, and this is again very different to what we had in the legacy version. The legacy version wasn't really a WYSIWYG application, so how you structured headers and footers was a little bit complex. Mathcad Prime headers and footers, very much like the worksheet, you put content in them, you can move it where you want, but that does include date format. And the date format up to this point has been pretty restricted to specific date formats used in the US. I'm from the UK, right? So there are no date formats that I'd like to add to the product, and we're going to try and get them in Prime 9, right? I have a master prioritization list that has many items on there, and an understanding of when we think right now we want to put them in. And right now, I think that date format update is in Prime 9. And like you said, that the main item for us to do is to offer an option for the let's call it the most used worldwide date format, but maybe there are other ways that we can provide options for users to structure it in the way they want. So yes, we are looking into doing that in Prime 9.
Great. So moving on here, is it possible to run a Mathcad of license? Run a license of Mathcad Prime 8 and Mathcad 15 side by side?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it still is. I mean, legacy versions of Mathcad have been end of sale from the end of last year, and that's a communication that we took to our customers about throughout 2021. There's a component in some versions of Mathcad that we're no longer able to distribute. So we end of saled some older versions of Mathcad at the end of last year. That doesn't mean that users can't continue to use them if they have licenses for them, right? Some people have subscription licenses for those versions of Mathcad that are still going to last for a number of years. Some people have perpetual licenses for Mathcad, and they will be able to continue to use those versions, and they will be able to continue to use those versions side by side on the same system with future versions of Mathcad. The license file is different, but it can still be used on the same system.
Great. Next one here is, I don't have internet access where I installed Mathcad. How do I request a license file?
Well, you can reach out to our sales team. I mean, there are ways that we can get installers to you. Although I will say, to get the license itself, you need internet access because you need to get the license via email. So again, if there's a way that you don't have internet access to get the license itself, I think there's probably a way that can be provided to you another way. But I would suggest reaching out to sales, which I think you can do pretty easily on the www.mathcad.com page, because I think any page you go on, we throw up a widget in the bottom right-hand corner, how can I help you widget, which goes straight through to our sales team. And a question I think like, I want to try Mathcad, I want to use it, but I don't have internet access. How do I get access to it? It is probably the ideal question to ask of that system.
Yeah, and we in Alfasoft can also help with any questions regarding stuff like that. So if you send an email to info@alfasoft.com, we would be able to help you with a license file in a case like that.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think from an Alfasoft perspective, I'm fairly certain you've handled this in the past, right? Because this isn't the first time we have, and I know you have, because of the areas you cover, DoD or MOD or FA&E and military contracts, military companies that work through you. And So I'm pretty certain that you've dealt with this in the past, because these are people that work on systems that by necessity can't be connected to the internet. So I'm fairly certain your Alfasoft reps have probably worked with this in the past and have solutions now.
Yes, the normal solution is to download the license file on a computer that has internet, and then you either burn it on a CD-ROM or something like that, or a USB stick, and then you take that into the safe environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah. Last question I have here is, what types of Mathcad licenses are available?
So you got two types. Well, okay. You have two types of licenses: subscription float and subscription locked. The subscription locked license is node locked to your machine. The subscription float license is driven from a float server. So, if you have multiple users, then it makes more sense to use, say, a pack of floating licenses, 5 floating licenses that 10 users can access, 5 concurrently. But if it's just 1 or 2, then it might make more sense to get a node lock license. And in the case of the earlier question, it might make more sense to have a node lock license if you're on a standalone computer, because again, for security purposes, you just want to run it on that computer. So yeah, they're all subscription, but they're subscription locked and subscription float.
Yep, sounds good. Perfect. And with that, I don't think there are any more questions that I can see. So thank you for delightful presentation, and hope you have a nice day.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.